Animal Welfare Committee to order. And we have a quorum and a full complement of members, Mr. Smith, Mr. Price, and myself. And we're going to begin with hearing from our city attorney on our rules of conduct for this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. So as PAW begins its first meeting of the calendar year, I'd like to remind everybody in the audience...
A little louder, please.
Excuse me.
Speaking of mic, please.
I'd like to remind everybody in the audience that we have new council and committee rules that have come into effect. The new rules state that a member of the audience who disrupts multiple council or committee meetings may be excluded from future meetings for 1 or more days. The number of days of exclusion would increase along with the number of disruptions. The exact rules are available on the city's website. They're also summarized on a large poster board at the back of the room or just outside the room. I'd like to make it clear that the new rules do not address the content of public speakers' remarks. Instead, the rules are designed to prevent actual repeated disruptions of council and committee meetings. And the hope of all the council and the committees is that the new rules will help us run our meetings more efficiently to get through our city business and to allow as many members of the public as possible to present their comments to their elected representatives in an orderly manner. Thank you for letting me remind everybody about the new rules. I'll let you begin.
Thank you. And we'll begin with general public comment, starting with Antonio Ramirez on multiple items. You'll have 2 minutes for your items and 1 for general public comment.
Thank you. Again, Officer Michael Duarte, thank you very much. What an elegant Mexican Latino. Absolutely stunning. Very polite and very well-mannered. Ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to thank all of our wonderful security services downstairs, starting with Officer Hiramoto-san, Jones, Wu, Carr, Joseph Carr, Tejeda, Mr. Sean Hall.
Excuse me, just for the record, you're not speaking on the items. Do you want to go to general public comment?
Oh, yeah, I thought it was good. I thought we were doing that.
Would you like to start with general public comment?
Okay. Please forgive me. I apologize. I want to start on a positive note. It's Happy New Year, and I really do want to appreciate our downstairs security officers who work their butts off. They are delightful. They are truly delightful. I can't tell you how much I appreciate them for their kindness and their zany and wacky personalities, and they're just lovely. They really are just beautiful people. And also your LAPD officers, Officer Marco Duarte, Officer Graciano, Officer Martinez, and Officer Morris. And your LAPD and your LA Fire Department and your Medivac pilots. Absolutely wonderful. I mean, this is truly a lovely, a positive sign of Los Angeles. So you are doing something positive. Again, it's wonderful to have life-saving pilots who just give great credibility. Even though we got a shitty mayor, we got a great group of pilots and people who represent the city in a positive way.
I have to ask you now to go to your 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Very much. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, in number 2, item number 2, the Bureau of Sanitation. I'd like to give credit to my father. My father, Antonio Ramirez, worked in the Department of Bureau of Sanitation as a top-notch mechanic. He was a staunch, he was like a Hitler type, a very, very stoic and very disciplined and very structured and a hard-ass worker who just loved to work. And so I dedicate the Bureau of Sanitation to my father that I hope to make it better. I hope it'll be much more positive because he was a straight shooter all the way. And the next one is item number 5. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, I'm all for the National Guard, the Naval Militia, and any part of the armed forces working for the city of Los Angeles and who will help in the combat the wildfires, etc. Let us compensate them fairly, and that means above and beyond what they truly deserve, and they deserve a high salary. These people are working with the elements of the universe, such as the wildfires, the snowstorms, the blizzards, and all that. They need to be compensated adequately and correctly and fairly. So again, to our pilots, to our military, whether on ground or the air, they deserve to be compensated just beautifully. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't know much about dogs. I really don't like animals, period. I don't care for animals, and god dang, I don't want them kissing or touching my face or my body, period. I'm sorry. I know I'm starting to learn about dogs through Herman. I'm sorry. I can't handle that, but that's beside the point. I can't understand why Americans love the animals so damn much, you know? But other than
Are you on any item?
yeah, sorry, I apologize. But lastly, if I may digress just a bit, I'd like to dedicate this book, The Thorn Birds. Absolutely beautiful, and it has animals galore. This is truly a beautiful book about
I'm sorry,
animals.
it's not on the item.
I'm sorry,
but
my apologies,
thank you.
I'm off. Thank you very much. It's called Thorn Birds. Lovely.
Next speaker is Mr. Herman.
Well, you all know I ain't gonna sugarcoat any of this shit here, motherfuckers. You can allow my temporary home for my dog and my cats. I'm not gonna allow
Is there a
that.
particular subject you're on?
Yeah, motherfuckers, I'm on number 9. If you're following the agenda, isn't that what you put in my goddamn head? I know how to motherfucker read just because I'm black. Don't mean you discriminate. In the issuance of community impact statement, it was once submitted. However, the Center Neighborhood Council objects to temporary home, motherfuckers. And you tell that Erica said if he can't help homeless people, how the fuck do you expect to take care of lost pets, motherfucker? And then on item number 10, that stupid motherfucker O'Farrell regarding LAMC section 5315.2, niggas, to require domesticated rabbits. Well, you should domesticate all human beings who are out there fucking like Jose Rizal and pay them off with our fucking money just to subject us to all this element of FBI conspiracy and transparency, niggas. Then we go on to the bases as dogs and cats. Am I on the right subject, Mr. Correct?
I don't know what item were you speaking
Now I'm on number 11, motherfucker. That's where you should follow along the way with this nigga. I know what Weston's up to. Weston has a design to functionally fuck up my city to take my dog and cat license away and stop me from selling my rabbits on the sidewalks of motherfucking streets to make a living. How do you expect motherfuckers who are homeless and don't got a place to call home stick their motherfucking temporary cat and dog and rabbits at? I'm trying to feed a family and I can't walk around this motherfucking street with sidewalks full of your goddamn blocking of my access. I need to set up my booth alongside Mr. Price, and sell some roosters down there in that neighborhood of Inglewood. I want to thank Mr. Price for having those goddamn roosters next to us. I was waking me up every motherfucking morning when I'm sleeping on the fucking sidewalk at 6 a.m. when I'm trying to get to my hustle here at City Hall and fuck with you white niggas, Wesson! So the last comment on my so-called 3 minutes of agenda communication of the mayor.
You're in your general public comments now. You have 2 minutes and then 1 minute.
I'm here to amend Rule 63, motherfuckers, because that content doesn't apply to me. I'm a white nigga, and no one's gonna tell me how to follow rules of decorum. Because as long as I got a senator in my neighborhood who's going to defend my civil rights and object to your discriminatory hate speech, I'm going to ask Bob Oswald, the senator from Sacramento, to write you a motherfucking letter to stop fucking with homeless people and stop fucking with my son's dog. Fuck you.
We have 2 speakers under general public comment, Phyllis Doherty and Jeffrey Mausner. You could both come up.
I also signed up for number 9. Do you want me to speak on both? Do I have to speak on both now?
Just general public comment.
Just general, all right. Phyllis, starting the animal issues movement. We have a lot of concern about an article that was in the LA Times where the Department of Animal Services is apparently inviting children that aren't in school to come in and help learn about animals and take care of animals so they won't be bored. Children that are off right now can go to school. they should be in school. They should not think that this is a time to play and to go into the animal shelters and nobody will be adequately supervising. You'll have children from 12 to 18, the groups that are always separated in school because of the problems that can develop between them, and also the fact of the danger, the liability. And again, they should be in school. They should not be taught that when there's some kind of a disagreement, they can just get around it by going out to the animal shelter and playing.
Thank you. And just for the record, Mr. Herman, you've been making distracting gestures to try to make it difficult for us to focus on our meeting. If you continue, we'll have to ask that you be removed. Mr. Mausner.
Good afternoon, Jeffrey Mausner. I'm handing you a resolution passed by the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils, which consists of all representatives of all 34 neighborhood councils in the San Fernando Valley. 2,000 to 5,000 dogs are brutally tortured and killed every day in the South Korean dog meat trade. Due to a belief that high adrenaline levels will produce tender meat and increase the supposed health benefits, dogs who are killed may be intentionally subjected to extreme fear and suffering and be killed by bludgeoning, hanging, or electrocution in front of the other dogs. Our city has very close ties with South Korea, which are detailed in the resolution. United States is spending billions of dollars to protect South Korea, and we've lost tens of thousands of our armed services personnel in the Korean War. The resolution passed by the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils requests that the City Council pass a motion opposing the South Korean dog meat trade and asking the South Korean government to ban the dog meat trade and enforce South Korea's animal cruelty laws. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's our last speaker under general public comment, so general public comment has been closed. And I don't believe we have, I don't show any other speakers under general public comment under any of the items, so I don't know if, I don't believe we've missed that, so public comment is also closed. As far as the items themselves, I will ask that we consider putting items number 3, 4, and 5 on consent without objection. Hearing none, those items will be approved on consent. So item number 3, we will approve the requested exemptions. Item number 4, we will receive and file it. And item number 5, we will approve the CAO's report recommendations, the city attorney's report, and the draft ordinance. And so let's begin with item number 1.
Item number 1, communication from the mayor relative to the exemption of 1 deputy superintendent of building, class code 9201, position for the Department of Building and Safety for the Civil Service pursuant to Charter Section 1001B.
Good afternoon, council members. Welcome in. Welcome back. Alma Guerrero from the Mayor's Office. We are presenting a request for exemption for 1 Deputy Superintendent of Building for Building and Safety. This is a re-exemption. It is part of the 150, and this position was authorized and funded in the budget.
And you already have someone in that position?
I believe it's vacant.
The position is vacant. It became vacant in November of 2018, but the department is currently working with the personnel department to fill the position.
Okay, so you don't have anyone in mind at this point for the position?
No.
Okay. Any other questions about this one? All right, so with that, I will ask that we approve the mayor's recommendation without objection. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 2.
Item 2, communication from the mayor relative to the exemption of 1 assistant director of sanitation, class code 7225, position, Bureau of Sanitation for the Civil Service pursuant to Charter Section 1001B.
Alma Guerrero, Mayor's Office. We're presenting this request for an Assistant Director of Sanitation. This is a new exemption. It will be part of the 150, and this position was authorized and funded as well in the budget.
And why do you need it? Why they ask?
Lisa Mowry, LA Sanitation. This position was approved in part of the fiscal year 17-18 budget. The request is for an assistant director who will focus on the area of external affairs. One of the things that our current assistant directors are always trying to balance on their plate is how much of their time are they spending on internal issues and how much of their time they're spending on external issues. For instance, we work with many regulatory agencies, both mainly in Sacramento, some on a federal level, and it's in our best interest and our customers' best interest to be involved as they're looking at new rules and regulations to put forward so that we can make sure that they're based on sound science, that there's something there that's actually can be implemented, something that's not going to put an undue burden on our customers to fund. And so it's important for us to have a presence with those organizations, and frankly, a lot of times our assistant directors are sort of struggling between trying to develop and maintain those relationships, as well as not doing that to the point where you're not spending enough time working on internal matters as well. And also by having all of our groups that are external facing, which right now are spread throughout our organization under the direction of one assistant director, that means we'll be able to make sure we have a much more cohesive message, and that we're able to maximize our opportunities. We don't have one group who's out talking to the public about an issue, and we're missing an opportunity to talk about other issues we have that could also be very important to that constituency. And so the concept is if we have this all together under one assistant director, we can do a lot more in that area to leverage those outreach efforts.
I mean, it sounds like a position that you need. My only real question is, why not do this through civil service? What makes that difficult?
And one of the things that we're looking at as an operational utility organization, the vast majority of our staff are operational engineering. We have a fairly limited number of staff who have more of that communications type expertise. So what our plan would be, should this exemption be approved, is certainly it's going to be open to internal staff who do have expertise in that area, but we do plan to look externally as well to see if we can get a robust candidate pool of people where that's their real strength. It's not something they do in addition to their real job.
Okay, any other questions, members?
One question.
Sure.
And just bringing me back up to date, on the 150 limitation, we're halfway through the fiscal year, we're at 147. So is there only 3 left, or are there some positions that just are reserved that are in the previous number but not been utilized yet?
What's been happening is there's been some people that leave the position, so the number kind of fluctuates up and down. And so, yes, as part of the 150, there are 3 left, but we still have some in the 50, the additional that was added.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, if there's no objections, I'll ask that we approve the mayor's recommendation on this item as well.
Thank you very much.
Item number 6.
Item 6, Department of General Services report, response to adopted budget recommendation relative to a hiring plan for custodial services using targeted local hire program and savings from the elimination of contract oversight costs. This matter has also been referred to the Information Technology and General Services Committee.
Good afternoon. My name is Cesar Avalos. I'm the Assistant Director to the Custodial Services Division. During the fiscal year 19 adopted budget, it was recommended that GSD provide a report including a hiring plan focusing on the targeted local hiring program. During the deliberations of the budget, Council moved $2.8 million of GSD's contractual services account into the UB. Pending the results or the consideration of the report. I'm here today to discuss and answer any questions you may have regarding the report.
Okay, I have a few. First of all, will the custodial positions that are left vacant as a result of promotions to custodian supervisor and senior custodians be backfilled with TLH participants?
Absolutely.
And I know the report states that there are 135 small outlying buildings that comprise 2.7 million square feet, which may be better suited for contractual services because they each require only a quarter-time employee. How much contractual services funding would GSD require to continue with contracted services at those locations?
We will need the entire 2.8 back from the UB.
Okay, and how long will the training period take for this program, and when will TLH hires be able to replace the current contractors?
Our program, it's a two-part program where we incorporate classroom training, where we train in policies, procedures, safety. From there, we go into a mentoring program. So there's a portion of mentoring program. I believe the program is a 6-month program before they become transition into custodians.
So I wonder if you could clarify for us, we're already pretty far into the fiscal year, and it seems pretty clear that we're not really going to be able to get the TLH program up and running for custodians in this fiscal year.
Okay.
But that we are going to start that program in the next fiscal year. So what's the timing on that? How's it all work now?
Well, we have submitted a budget package for the next fiscal year, so we're pretty much ready to start, provided that the funding or the budget package is funded. So we would be ready to start July 1st. However, there is approximately a 3-month window for hiring.
So we'll start hiring during this fiscal year, but actually start people in next fiscal year? How will it work?
I think we can look into, we have hired currently 5 candidates from the targeted local hire program. So we're well on our way.
But as I understand it now, the plan is to take the money out of the UB, but to resume contracting for this year because we haven't left ourselves enough time to hire from the program. But next year, we will be able to transition into targeted local hire in the buildings that make sense because there'll be enough of a concentration of employees.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite following.
Well, I want it to be clear that even though we set aside money with the hope that we would start the program this year, it's not really going to be feasible, as I understand it, to start timely this year. But we will transition a number of those buildings to in-house custodial services in the next fiscal year.
Loretta Cornyn, Director of Custodial Services. Yes, that would be our training program, the portion of the program that would be dedicated to training these individuals with potentially no custodial experience at all, lasts about 2 months. And so placement into a facility under the mentorship and then monitoring their progress within what they have learned in the training program goes on from there. And so that would be a placement into one of the buildings coming in-house.
And do we have a sense of the timing, whether we actually start hiring and training before we actually put folks in the field doing the work? Do we start the training during this fiscal year, or will that whole program start in the next fiscal year?
We could feasibly start the training in this fiscal year. So that would require, some of the positions and funding for the couple of months that would take for a full implementation on July 1.
At least from my point of view, I'd certainly encourage that we get as early a start on that as we can. Colleagues, any questions?
Yeah, just
Mr. Price.
First of all, thank you for your leadership in the targeted hiring. We know it's been a program.
We're excited about it.
We're trying to push it, and so we're glad that the department is really embracing it. I wasn't clear with the discussion. Could you give us an idea what the time is for this pilot effort? It's going to be like a 2-year program or 6-month program? What's your thought in terms of the pilot nature of the program? And then secondly, how are we going to measure success? Is it just who gets hired, how long they stay hired, or where they get hired? Or thoughts on that?
There's a lot of success points. The success points obviously would be hiring the targeted local candidates, providing a better level of service by them being city employees. We would measure the success of the program by the recidivism. That's certainly a measurable statistic that we could have. And then there's all kinds of other peripheral benefits to these workers getting on the streets and getting a job.
Well, the bottom line is that they become employed. That's
Absolutely.
trained and employed.
Right.
That's the goal.
Right.
Thank you for your efforts.
I know certainly in the other departments, the pattern is that the workers we hire through TLH wind up being more enthusiastic and more excited about the jobs that they've gotten and often do a better job than other employees that we would hire in these positions. So we're expecting to find the same result here.
We're hopeful that the training for this, because we do have chemicals which can be, there are safety factors to consider. So that's why we have put emphasis on the training portion of that program prior to placement into a facility.
Any other questions, comments, anybody? If not, I would ask that we approve this item and that we approve the report noting that position authorities requested in recommendation number 4 should be resolution authorities authorized from January 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2019. And subject to allocation by the Civil Service Commission. I refer the report to the Budget and Finance Committee so they can consider the report's third recommendation, the $253,000 requested transfer from the UB to the mid-year for the mid-year adjustments line item, as well as to determine whether 6-month funding is still needed. And also, I would recommend that once the program begins that we ask the department to come back, at least in the beginning, with quarterly reports on how we're doing in terms of hiring.
Oh, and then releasing the $2.8 million for the continuation of services to the 135 small facilities?
Yes. Yes, that would all be part of my recommended motion. And we will ask that we pass that without objection. Hearing none, that item is passed. Thank you very much. Item number 7.
Item 7, Controller Report relative to proposed new electronic payment option for city vendors, also referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Afternoon. Welcome back, sir. Welcome. The item before you is are the administrative actions required for the Controller's Office to implement the city's new e-payables vendor payment option. As you probably know, the Controller's been working pretty much for as long as he's been here to improve the level of service the city provides to its many vendors. And one of the primary ways we've been doing that is improving the options for payment, for paying our vendors. Almost all of our vendors currently get paid by paper check that we mail to them, so we're in an effort to try and change that. One of the things we've put together at this point is this e-payables option. The way it works from a vendor standpoint is once they're signed up, They invoice the city just like they normally do. Instead of mailing a check to them, they will get an email with a link in it. They'll click the email, and the money will be in their account. No delay, no it's in the mail, no we sent it, your secretary has it. It'll just be the money's in your account right now. What we need at this point in order to get that done is the creation of one fiduciary fund to deal with the bank, because these are inherently credit card accounts. And then one fund to deal with kind of the city benefit side of this, which is the rebates we'll be getting back from the bank. So the way this works from a financial aspect is just like with your normal credit card that offers a rebate back for spending it, we get a rebate back for spending on our credit card here. So we'll get between, I think, 1 and 1.8% of our purchases through the program back in rebates, which will be general fund revenue. So that'll require creation of a couple new funds. We also, in the Controller's Office, will need one person to do the daily reconciliation of all the payments that get made through the program. We need to check the records that come from the bank about the payments that they made and make sure that those match the payments in FMS. That person will also be in charge of dealing with any payment cancellations that come up, as they do from time to time, and providing department support on the program, at least in the early days. And I'm here for any questions.
And that position you mentioned is a senior accountant position? And it's one resolution authority for that position. Correct. And do you have someone in your office that can do that, or will you be hiring a new person?
Undoubtedly, there are lots of accountants in the Controller's Office that could do that, but we'll be using the relatively new senior accountant list and hiring up for that.
Okay. And other city departments, will anyone have to hire additional personnel to participate in this program, or is it just coming out of your office?
From the department side, the program is virtually invisible. The payments are approved the exact same way as any other payment is approved. The only difference is on the back end, those payments will be shown in FMS as being made by e-payable instead of by check.
No extra charges to the vendors for participating?
There is an extra banking charge to the vendor for using it. The benefit the vendor gets on the kind of for that money is the speed of payment and the certainty of payment, because they will know exactly when it's going to come, and when it's going to come is tomorrow, rather than when the payment gets approved, when the check gets put in the mail, when the mail delivers it, how long it takes them to do their paper. It is a completely voluntary program on the vendor side. The banks reach out to the vendors and kind of present them how the program works and the benefits, and then the vendor makes a decision of whether they want to be part of the program or not. If the vendor changes their mind, they can always rescind that. So being completely voluntary, the program will work for many vendors and won't work for others, but that's up to them.
Yeah, I suspect a lot of people will participate, because one of the complaints I've heard over the years from vendors with the city is they don't get paid timely, they don't have a sense of when they're going to get paid, so this actually corrects a lot of problems that people have complained about since long before I got here.
That's our goal.
For sure. So it sounds like a great program.
Great.
Other comments, questions, Mr. Price?
Thank you. What's the plan to educate potential users? I can see large corporations obviously taking advantage of this. How do small, medium-sized businesses to be aware and then to take advantage?
So
leaving it to the banks to do that sales job? Are we going to be?
Essentially, the first outreach is done by Visa, who's the account issuer, and they have the resources with a wide variety of vendors. So they're kind of our first wave, and we get the most kind of bang for our buck. And as you said, a lot of the big vendors that are already probably accepting payments like this from other partners. Most of that, I think, will be handled by Visa. As we get farther into the program and we get more experience with it, I think we'll evaluate how that's kind of working and what that spread is. And I would anticipate that somewhere down the line, we will probably want to do a city outreach to some of the smaller vendors. But we we will be doing at least one outreach to all of our FMS vendors. So everybody will get... Right now, we're doing vendor outreach with the GSD commodity vendors. Once that's done, we'll reach out to the rest of our FMS services vendors, probably in the next 2 to 3 months, maybe 4 or 5, depending on how long the GSD process takes.
And you envision the whole program rolling out over the next 6 months, 2 months?
Yeah, we'd like to be making our first payments to those first commodities vendors that have been signed up within the next couple months, and I think we'd really be seeing the program at full speed within about 6 months.
Thank you.
Yeah, a couple questions. Mr. Smith? Thank you. So let me ask you, one of the problems we've already heard is the lateness of cities' payments. Have we been able to shorten that time frame up with any consistency now?
I would say we've probably been able to shorten it. I would not say with consistency.
Okay. So what is the general average net pay?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
And this is going to help by a few days realistically versus mailing it. It's going to make it easier for your office as far as mailing goes. So you'll show the process only realistically a few days though, which is nice.
We will be, as a kind of program incentive, we will be approving these payments for immediate release out of FMS, which will take some more days off of it.
Yeah, okay.
So we would expect, I think what we're looking at is that the payments probably come into at least 2 to 3 weeks faster.
Oh, that's much better, much better. Okay,
It will still depend, of course, on the department's processing invoices and approving the payments, which is sometimes a problem, and that's not something we can build a system around.
Okay, thank you.
It sounds like people have a much better sense of when they're going to get paid before they get paid.
Yes.
So, not that I'm a big Uber or Lyft fan, but I know you can kind of watch the vehicle coming as it's arriving. So you have a certain amount of certainty because you can see it, whether it's coming as quickly as you'd like or not. I think this will have kind of the same impact, and I think that's sort of reassuring for our vendors. So I think that's a real positive.
The nice things for the drivers, though, they get paid immediately after you say yes. You know, they get their transfer right away, so.
Well, this is pretty close to that. So
We're getting better.
We are.
That's good.
So one thing I'd like to ask is that once the program is completely up and running, if someone from your office could come back and update us in this committee, that would be great. So that being said, we'd like to approve the controller's recommendations without objection. Any objection? No, so that is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you for presenting. Item number 8.
Item 8, Department of Animal Services report relative to amending the Los Angeles Municipal Code, sections 53.15.2 and 53.17, in connection with address requirements for the issuance of licenses.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. So we had a little debate about who was coming up here, and I said, you wrote it. This tracks what this is for the issuance of licenses for persons who are homeless. The idea is an excellent one, and it tracks the reality, which is that a lot of homeless people have dogs, and it makes a lot of sense that those dogs are licensed. I should point out that in addition to changing city codes, we do have a bit of an issue with state law, because state law also has provisions in it that license applications need to have the name and address of the owner. And so our office would have to do some research and maybe consult with others to see if there is some way that we can work with that. But I want to just put that up front so that this doesn't come as a surprise further down the road.
But you'd be able presumably to do that as we work on the ordinance draft itself.
Well, yes. Again, the question is whether my office would want to spend too much time working on the ordinance until we're certain that the ordinance would pass muster under state law.
And there probably is a conflict with state law because state law requires the rabies vaccine. So if we can't find a way to identify where a homeless community member lives, we can't comply with state law for the rabies vaccine.
Can you not verify the vaccine before you issue the license?
But we would have to, because the license
That's
can
required.
only, right, the license can only be issued if there's a valid rabies certificate.
So I would think that would be good enough, right? 'Cause
It would for me, but I'll defer to Mr. LaSalle.
So again, there are issues, but I think that they need to be addressed because the reality is that you have a fair number of homeless people with dogs, and your choice is either to keep them unlicensed and potentially not vaccinated against rabies, or to find a way to license them, regularize it, make people responsible for the pets that they have. But at the same time, if it was just city law that we were dealing with, that would not be as much of a, that wouldn't be a problem because that could be changed, and I think there's a good rationale for changing. However, there is this matter of state law that we would really need to do some more research on.
And some people in the past, some rescues have allowed community members who are homeless to use them as an address. We're trying to come up with a way that people can actually comply with what the law is and should be.
And what do we do currently with addressing homeless people with pets?
Well, we have services. We provide services where we work with other nonprofits such as Downtown Dog Rescue and Inner City Law, and we do provide free spay-neuter vouchers. Downtown Dog Rescue, Inner City Law provides other services for homeless community members. Our main role is to be there, be present, and to give spay-neuter vouchers to get the animals altered.
Okay. Mr. Smith, you had a
I was
question?
just going to say, I remember years ago, we had a problem with a lot of homeless people, particularly veterans and others, not being able to get government checks because they didn't have permanent addresses. The resolution was people like Weingart and others provided an address for them. So could we outreach to those same people and say, could you do that for this as well?
Yes, and I think that the department has that in mind as well. But as the general manager mentioned, what we were hoping for ultimately was to have some process that's more direct than that.
An exemption.
Yeah.
Could you do it as a public health emergencies type of thing? No?
No, state law is pretty clear.
People in Sacramento, I don't know.
Hey, we could always go back and try and change it. I still have a few more years on my list. Any other questions, comments? I'd like to have us approve the report recommendations, I guess with a direction first that we clarify that we can take these actions under state law, or that we have a route to do that, and then to move forward with the drafting of an ordinance.
Right.
So without objections, we would make that motion.
Okay.
And hearing none, that motion is approved. Thank you very much.
We might as well stick around. I think we're on the next one as well.
Item number 9.
Item 9, City Attorney Report Ordinance relative to amending Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 53.09 to allow temporary home care for a lost or stray dog or cat.
The only thing that the department would like to request is near the bottom of this, there's a wording that says that they will, after 30 days, they will come to the shelter and adopt the dog and license the dog. We would like to have that adoption fee be waived for people who have provided home care for 30 days for an animal, and just let them come and buy the dog license so that we can get them into the system.
With no objection, I'd consider that as an amendment before us. I have one concern, which is under this process, to do this, you have to contact Animal Services within the first 4 hours of finding an animal. And I would think typically, since most people are not well informed in this area, especially people that aren't animal owners that may find themselves in this situation, that we may be excluding the opportunity by limiting them to 4 hours. It certainly could take longer than that, although some of the things that you recommend are pretty natural. Years ago, I found 2 dogs, and I did exactly what was recommended. I put signs up in the neighborhood for a couple block radius. Now, the owner actually was stupid enough to think that, well, the dog's been out for a couple days, so they saw the signs go up and they said, well, it couldn't apply to us, it's already been a couple days. So 3 weeks later, they called us to see if it was their dog, and of course it was.
Wow.
And by then, those dogs had peed in our place and all kinds of wonderful stuff, so that wasn't great. But anyway, the 4 hours seems unrealistic. I mean, in a perfect world where people knew they had that obligation, 4 hours would be very reasonable. But for an average person that doesn't already have an animal and may not have that experience, I think you'd want to give them a little more time to call around to different agencies and figure out that they have this option and they have a certain amount of responsibility with it.
Point well taken.
So it is well taken, and if I may add, that the 4 hours is already in the code. So the code already requires either 2 hours or 4 hours, depending on whether the dog is tied up to anything or just running around as a stray. But there is a short period of time in which you have to contact the department. Now, realistically, in my years with the department, when somebody calls up and says, I found the dog this morning, but I took him to work with me because I couldn't stop off earlier, etc., or I didn't know you had to do this. The question of not knowing is always an issue. Actually, what we tried to do is then in this ordinance divide this out, leave the 4 hours for the first 4 items that we would require of somebody, but then we added a subsection E, which within the first 24 hours, again, trying to be realistic, which is, I think, the point that you're trying to make, dividing out those times where somebody should ask with greater alacrity and for those actions that can require a little bit more time. The problem of people not knowing times, I know that I've walked around downtown and seen dogs with no licenses, and I'm amazed at the number of people that tell me, I didn't know you had to license a dog. So the fact that people don't know what the law requires, we're always going to run into that problem. But at least this way, you do have a responsibility. I'm sure that the department will make sure to get that word out, that when you find an animal, you have to let the department know within 4 hours. But that's already on the books. So
Right.
we haven't
My
changed.
concern is how it impacts the program. So we don't say, okay, you've contacted us 5 hours after you found the animal, so you now can't participate in the program, you have to just bring it to the shelter. So I want to be sure that the wording, allows for people that call in later than the time that we've stated to still participate in the program and aren't excluded.
Okay.
So, I don't know if that can be moved back to 24 hours, and maybe the second category should be moved back to 48. I mean, I think holding people to an ideal standard when they don't know what the heck they're doing and they happen to find an animal randomly, I think is a bad idea, not
Well,
that practical.
certainly, we want to set people up to succeed and not to fail.
Right. And I think your big concern, as I hear it, is that the department not hold that against somebody for calling in 12 hours later rather than 4 hours later. So we'll take a look at the language and we'll work with the department to see if we can address that legitimate concern.
How do we deal with the liability of an animal in a person's home? Have we looked at that?
I believe
the city
the program
responsibilities are.
states that they are responsible for the pet while they have it.
Okay. And we think that will cover us legally?
We can look into that with our litigation department. We thought that would be sufficient. There is clearly the possibility that if someone takes in a dog and that dog bites them, or they lose the dog, that there is potential liability. I think the department looked at this as much as we do with the foster program, that it's possible to have someone else look after the dog for the department as long as it's clear that the dog belongs to the department and they need to be careful how they deal with it. They have to keep it in the same place. They have to obey all laws, etc. We can do some more research on the liability issue. And
If we can just take an extra look to tighten it up as much as we can. Other questions, members? Let's see if I have one more. Now, what if someone wants to keep the dog longer than the 30 days, but isn't necessarily ready to adopt it? How do we address that?
If they came into the shelter at the end of 30 days and said, I haven't found the owner, but I'm kind of attached to this dog, I don't really want to adopt it, and I don't want to license it, but I want to keep it for a little while longer, we could make them a foster volunteer. And then it would be our dog, and they would be providing foster care.
So if someone wanted to do it for a little longer, as we continue to look for the owner, we do have a path to do that as well.
Exactly.
Okay, well, it sounds like a very positive program, and I think it'll help us to protect more dogs and keep them in a good environment. So,
And increase community engagement.
and so I don't know in terms of the wording what we should do with the hours. Should we change it from 4 to 24?
If we could possibly get back to you, either in committee or council on that. I think that the concern expressed by the department in the past and by my office is that oftentimes there's a critical time period when a dog is lost. And so what you want is to be able to get that dog into the system, because if it doesn't go into the system for a while, oftentimes people give up hope. And so hence we kept the 4 hours that's already in the code. The bigger issue is, I think, the one that you expressed of if somebody doesn't follow that 4 hours, are they barred from participating and sort of keeping the dog for this period of time? We can look at both of those. But I would recommend to the committee that at this point not change that 4 hours.
If we can give you direction to come up with a way to address that, to make sure that people who've had a dog for 5 hours aren't barred from participating in the program, because I suspect you could have half the people that call in with an animal that would like to do this miss the deadline of 4 hours.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak as if I'm knowledgeable about the code, but I think that there is some part in that code that gives the general manager some authority that's in the current code. So I think that would probably cover it.
We'll take a look at that. I understand the concept and perfectly fine to do it with that proviso.
And it could be workable that way, but if it turns out we wind up having a bunch of people, whether you have to individually review every case where somebody found a dog, you probably don't want to do that either. So let's try to make this as practical as we can. Otherwise, I would just recommend that we approve the city attorney's report and ask them to move forward.
There's comment.
Now, we don't show a public comment slip on this? I don't know if the system missed it or not, but we don't show it, but I will assume that both of you have said that you'd like to comment earlier, so let's give you both the opportunity.
We did sign up.
Okay, so it doesn't seem to be registering here, but let's have you speak before we vote on the item.
You've got 4 hours to do this in.
There's a community impact statement on this.
Identify yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Jeffrey Malsner. I'm the second vice president of the Tarzana Neighborhood Council and chair of its Animal Welfare Committee. And I'm also a volunteer at the West Valley Shelter. There's a community impact statement on this. There it is.
And
5 minutes, Adam.
And I don't know if you want to give us a
Okay.
20-second summary of what that's all about.
I actually wrote a City Watch article about this. The objection to it is that it's going to cause deaths of dogs and cats. That's written about in the article here. No one has made a cogent argument for how this found pets procedure will legalize dog or cat theft. Do you want me to stop, or?
I'll let you continue your thought for a moment.
Yeah. If someone wants to steal a dog or cat, they're certainly not going to utilize the procedure set out in this new ordinance. The ordinance requires that if someone wants to care for a found pet in their home, within 4 or 24 hours of finding the animal, they have to notify the nearest city animal shelter that the animal is in their possession and give the shelter their name, address, and contact information. What criminal would steal a dog or cat and then notify the Animal Services Department of his name, address, and contact information? I was a federal prosecutor, and I know some criminals are dumb, but not that dumb. People will just steal the dog or cat and not notify Animal Services. And if they're dumb enough to actually notify Animal Services, then they can be arrested. The found pets procedure will allow a dog...
I'll have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay. It's better for the dogs. They don't have to go through the trauma in the shelter. But a really important point is that this policy will free up kennels for other dogs, potentially saving their lives, especially during the 4th of July period, when hundreds of lost dogs are coming into the shelters. This will allow people to keep the dogs, some of these dogs in their homes, and dogs in the shelter will not have to be killed to make space. And I ask that you get this policy in place and actually running by June so that it's available for this 4th of July period. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll certainly encourage the department to make every effort to do that.
Thanks.
One other question for the... Oh, Phyllis, if you'd like to speak, why don't you come up and testify also?
Is this 2 minutes on this?
1 minute.
For a subject? All right. I should have done it on the multiple then, when Phil Story. The one thing we haven't talked about is the welfare of the animal. These are unvetted people. We know nothing about them. They may think they have a wonderful place. It may be terrible. They may not treat animals the way we want them treated. People pay $44 million a year for animal shelters where their animal will be safe and they can find it. This is private property. We pay for that service. We also pay so that the strays won't be out and people can be attacked. And it's a rabies law that the city must pick up strays and make sure that they have rabies law. We have rabies vaccinations. So you are depriving people of their property. This is personal property. They have a right to go to the shelter and find it. If our shelters for $44 million are that bad, we need to make our shelters better because people have a right to go in and get their personal property, and the city does not have a right to form contracts with unknown individuals where the city assumes all the liability, because as long as they're taking that number and they're a city agency, which is what you're doing, the city has liability for bites, attacks, and medical care. You cannot just say to somebody, oh, we're giving you that liability. The other person who has liability is the owner of the animal, because they have insurance on the animal, and if that animal gets in any kind of problem while it's with these people, everybody's liable. The city, the person who has it, and the owner. This is not that easy. And again, this is a civil rights violation for keeping people's property. I'm winding up right now.
Okay, thank you. Couple more quick questions for...
Can I get public comment?
Did you sign up for it?
I did.
Do we show it anywhere? Why don't you just come up and give us your name? I don't think our system's working perfectly.
Hi, I'm Diana Mendoza, speaking as a member of the public. I just want to bring up the issue of whether unaltered animals will be applicable for this, because obviously these animals are in unfamiliar environments and they may continue to try and get out, and so they do leave their foster homes where they're not familiar with it. They may go out and continue breeding, so I would like to ask that unaltered animals not be allowed to be fostered out. I'm not entirely sure what the fostering is with the other foster animals are with this, but it seems that it just would make sense that these animals, especially who are in unfamiliar environments, not be able to escape and breed even more and contribute more to the animal overpopulation crisis.
Thank you. And if that's our last person testifying, we'll close the public hearing on this item. A couple of quick questions for the department. Maybe come back up. Do we have any thoughts on how to deal with unaltered animals in this same circumstance?
Well, I think we did not rule out the fostering of unaltered animals if people find one in their neighborhood. Most of the pets that are found, as my understanding, are pets who belong to someone and who have been previously altered. Certainly, if someone had a female dog come in, for example, in heat, they would not likely want to keep that in their home. They would probably want to bring her to the shelter just for hygiene reasons.
Okay, and do we do anything to help people reunite with their animals if they're in someone's home? Do we ask them to take a photograph and have you keep that?
We actually require photographs, and one of the things our IT department is looking at and has planned for is to post their pictures on our website so that when people are going through the website, they can find the dog and identify it. And then if they contact the shelter, we will arrange a meet and greet with the person who's caring for the pet at home at one of our shelters, not at someone's private home.
Okay, and do you have a way to educate people that find themselves in this situation on all of the rules and how long you have to keep it before it could be adoptable, et cetera, et cetera?
Certainly we'll have to put something on the website and create flyers and brochures. This is a program that's practiced across the country, and we actually modeled ours after some other programs that have been very successful. It's a way to get community engagement and community involvement and to actually give the companion animal a home environment and home care while they're waiting for their families to be reunited with them.
And so hopefully put it on the homepage, Facebook page.
Right.
Talk about it in department newsletters for a while. And
there are programs going on in the city right now, even though they are not authorized, and we're not able to help them by putting the pictures of the animals up on our Facebook, but there are a number of communities in the city who have an active program like this, and I've been in touch with them, and they're reporting no real challenges or problems with the program, and they are getting the animals back home, and my understanding is that they're getting them back home in less than 2 weeks.
Okay, well, thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll ask that we approve the city attorney's report and draft ordinance with the recommendation that we look at how to clarify that someone that responds to the animal in a later time than our regulations is not prevented from participating in the program. And other than that, we will move the item without objection. Hearing none, that is approved. Item number 10.
Item 10, motion, Corenzo Farrell, relative to amending Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 53.15.2 to require domesticated rabbits to be spayed or neutered on the same basis as dogs and/or cats.
We support. At this point, we counted this morning, I think, 296 bunnies in our system, which is a lot. And I think the bunny may be the next cat in terms of numbers. So anything that we can do to teach people that they're good companion animals, but they're better companion animals if they're altered, we totally support. We do spay and neuter all the rabbits that we have in the shelter and microchip them before we place them in homes.
Very good. And obviously rabbits are well known for their multiplication abilities, so this is clearly an obvious idea whose time has come.
Yes,
so.
Indeed.
Are our current providers that spay and neuter cats and dogs for us, are they capable of doing rabbits, or is there any greater difficulty?
There is a greater difficulty, and not all veterinarians do it, but a number of the veterinarians who have contracts with the city do. And also some of the local veterinarians who just have letters of agreement with us that they can do up to a certain amount, also spay and neuter the bunnies. They're a little bit more likely to have a heart attack, to pass away when they're in surgery, so it's a delicate surgery. Just rabbits themselves are a little bit more sensitive, so it's a little more expensive. It's certainly more expensive than altering cats, and sometimes more expensive even than dogs. But it's when we do, we don't really do vouchers for bunnies, but when we pay our partners for doing the bunnies for us, for the shelter, we pay them at the same rate as the dogs rather than as the cats.
And presumably we can be extra careful that we refer to vets that actually have the capability of doing these more difficult surgeries.
Yeah, and honestly, most vets who aren't comfortable doing rabbits and who aren't pretty successful at it are not going to want to take that liability on.
Okay. Mr. Smith, anything to add? If not, I will note that Mr. Price has had to move on to another meeting, but I'll ask that we approve this without objection, and so this motion is approved. Item number 11.
Item 11, motion, Coretz Weston, relative to reviewing the design, functionality, sustainability, resilience, and maintenance of the animal shelter system and related matters.
Hello, welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. Tammy Watson, Department of Animal Services, and we just want to say that we welcome the opportunity to work with BOE and GSD to assess the functionality of our animal shelters and make a recommendation to this board, this committee and council as to how we can improve the facilities.
And has the department met yet with the other appropriate departments and the CAO to start working on a report back?
We have not met yet, but we have been working with GSD for some of the modifications that we've discovered throughout the years, but we haven't met to report back on this report yet.
And does the department need any additional direction in terms of how to deal with the climate change element? Because obviously the shelters were designed not for periods where we have long droughts and heat followed by possible periods of truly intense rain and possible flooding. So I don't know how focused we are on that element, but clearly whatever would have been built 30, 40, 50 years ago is not anticipating the kind of weather we're seeing and the more extremes that we'll face in the future.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, we have a very good working relationship with General Services, and one of the things that they've been doing is some of our equipment becomes outdated or no longer works. They're looking at the climate change. Some of the equipment that was calculated, such as the HVAC systems, 20 years ago, it's no longer applicable. So they're very much conscious of that, and that'll be one of the big issues we're looking at. I think it was the Northeast Mission that the system was mostly swamp coolers and didn't work, and so they are replacing that with something that's functional.
And certainly, in our lifetimes, we'll probably see 125-degree temperatures in the San Fernando Valley, for instance. So presumably, we'd want to anticipate the ability to cool a day that hot and deal with incredible amounts of rain, which could happen as well. So.
One other question, as we go forward and we're looking at redesign or anything, are we looking also at LEED standards as far as any upgrades?
Most of the shelters were built under some LEED standard.
The newer ones, yeah.
But the newer ones, yes. We haven't actually, since we haven't met with the controller and GSD and BOE, we haven't talked about that. I can't imagine BOE not looking at LEED standards, but we can certainly put that on the list. I think that's very important.
Thank you.
So have we looked at things like solar roofs and rain capture on the properties and such things?
Yeah, I'm sure that those are all things that must be considered, particularly with the way the climate has changed so rapidly.
Very good. Well, with no objections, I'll ask that we approve this motion. So the motion is approved without objection, and I believe that is it. So we are adjourned.